Actually, I interned 3 summers for ICI and doing field development work in upstate New York, West Virginia, Florida, and Texas. And anyway, I did research on crops all around the country, thinking I was going to go into that. But right about when I graduated in 1980, they started downsizing the ag chem businesses, and all around the country and the world. And they so there weren't very many opportunities. So in the meantime, I really liked motorcycles, and I rode them since I was 10. I still ride them. So I went to work for Delaware Cycle Center, which was on Elkton Road. Well, now it's South Main Street, but it was, I'm trying to think what's there now. There was, anyway, it's 136 Elkton Road. But so I sold Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki motorcycles, and I was sold more than, well, twice as many as the other 2 salesmen combined, just because I was so interested in them. And I knew my product really well. I memorized all the specs, and I wasn't high pressure. I just more consultative selling. But I hadn't had any training at that point, but I just enjoyed that. But then, so I did that for 5 months, and I was making about $40,000 a year back then. But then I figured out they were cheating us on our commissions, and I confronted the management, and they said, well, that's just how it is, so I quit. And then went sailing for 5 months all around. But anyway, so then I actually did get a job in the field at DuPont at Stein Lab doing herbicide screening, and I worked there. They had a hiring freeze, but there were about 20 of us that worked there through Workforce, a temporary agency. And when they lifted the freeze, they had 5,000 applications, but I made the cut, having worked there for 2.5 or about 2 years. But after a while, I kind of figured out I didn't really want to be a lab technician. I was more suited for sales and marketing sort of things. I didn't want to stay in that, so I heard of a position at a company called NORAM, which is part of Hercules and spun off from a couple different companies, but they were in Wilmington, and I was hired there to look at emerging markets for their products. So I had 3 new products that I managed. I was there, I think, about 7 years, and I researched all kinds of different products. I got to travel to all around the country to land-grant universities and look at like hops, which is used in beer. It's grown in upstate Oregon and Washington. I got to go all through the agricultural area of California and Louisiana, rice and wheat, all types of different crops. And that was very interesting. I was actually on offer from them at the same time, and also met my wife-to-be. So I decided to stay here and not go over there. And it was still a little bit of anti-American sentiment over there. I had been to Berlin to the parent company, and the wall hadn't come down yet. And but if I'd known that was going to come down, I probably would have gotten married and moved over there, because it changed a lot of things. But anyway, so I ended up going to work for Gore, and I became the product specialist, which is like a market, business, and product manager. And so I managed the running and cycling businesses, and then developed the motorsports and water sports businesses. Because they had never been successful in the sailing market, which is very rigorous. There were 6 technical issues that we had to solve, and then we had to present to Bob Gore to get permission to actually go back into that market, because we had failed so miserably in the early days of Gore-Tex fabric. And having sailed since I was 10 and raced all up and down the East Coast, our whole family, I was very interested in that market. So we worked on all these technical issues. I could get into that later if somebody wants to know about that, but it had to do with transmission through the Gore-Tex membrane. It's heat and mass, excuse me, mass transfer, and you would get reverse transmission back through the fabric because it's not one way. It depends on the gradient of heat, temperature, and pressure, and concentration of water. So anyway, we solved all those, but I also liked motorcycles, like I said, and so I developed the market for that and snowmobiles. And so anyway, Gore was a great place to train. They put us through all different types of courses in strategy of experimentation, statistical analysis software, SAS, and sales training, sales negotiations, value pricing. I have some of those listed later. But I wanted to go to graduate school, and they wouldn't pay for that, and I didn't really have time because I traveled so much. So I decided to go to the one thing I hadn't done. I'd done market research and product management all. So I wanted to get direct sales experience in a bigger company. So I went to work for a company called SMC Pneumatics, which was from Japan and coming into the US. And that was a lot of fun because it was a new product. We had a lot of flexibility. We could discount ourselves just as a salesman up to 60% if we could justify the volume that we would get. And so I grew my territory 40% over budget every year. And I, at the same time, went to the executive MBA program here. And that was a great experience, 19 months, very intense, and worked full-time the whole time. And I'm amazed my family could put up with that, but because we had Charlie, and then Brenna was born when I started that. Got to embarrass the family a little bit, you know. But I have more later too. So anyway, so I did that and graduated. They offered me SMC a position as national sales manager, but we didn't want to move to Indianapolis because all our family's around here. So it was a tough decision, but we decided to stay here. And then I found a position with a company called NDX, National Dentex, which was a publicly traded owner of dental laboratories all around the country. And that's kind of a stretch, I know, but having, the etymology and plant pathology is mostly biology and chemistry, so it applied to that. And mainly I was internal business manager, basically. I managed 7 labs all around the country, like 360 people at them, and we had to, help them bring their systems and marketing and sales and all the systems up to speed. And I got good enough at the technical side that I developed a whole quality management program that was visual. We had, for each step in the process, I took pictures and outlined the best practices, and then technicians, even if they didn't really know that area, they could work through that and do a really good job, because very labor-intensive, exacting work. Like the gap between a crown and your tooth when they prepare it is 30 microns, so it's very precise. And if you have a little bit more of a gap between teeth, food will get caught in it, and it's painful, and you have other health issues. And so that was really interesting too. But they started downsizing after I was there 7 years and got promoted a number of times. And but they started sending a lot of work to China, and they eventually went private again. So I was one of the people that saw the writing on the wall. I took a severance package, and we were looking at various things to do after that, like start a business or buy a franchise. So I'll go into that coming up. So I'll tell you more about it. But as we were looking at different things, I always liked working with my hands, and my wife and I renovated a house that was built in 1880 and sold that and did real well. paid off like 3 cars and down payment on the next house. So that was in Hockessin. But anyway, I just started doing projects for friends and family in the meantime, and it turned into a business on its own. But I didn't even seek it out, which is kind of probably not what you want to hear, because you want to plan things. But we actually, and so here's an example of a project I finished last fall. It's north of Newark, and we built a 2-car garage, and I hired an architect to design it because it was on a slope of 40 degrees and it's fill dirt, so it wasn't stable. So we had to deal with that, and also to match the architecture of the house. And then we tore off the old 2 decks, and there was no patio, so we built that, helped them, we designed it with the customers, and built that, and then rebuilt the 2 decks, and they're made with composite lumber. There's 4 types of composite. It's very strong, and it has a water drainage system built in, so that underneath on the patio, which the lower deck comes out 12 feet, they can have a party under there. It's 54 feet long, and so they can have quite a party under there. It has lighting, and it's now it has, you can't see it now, but it has a ceiling under it. I have to go get a new picture, but a lot of times I don't get back to projects for a while. But also they wanted this stainless steel cable railing, and the posts and cap rail are Ipe, which is Brazilian walnut, and it's very expensive, but it's real durable outdoors. You just oil it, kind of like teak on a sailboat or something. But Delaware doesn't allow stainless cable railings. The code says you can't have a ladder-like railing because they think people or kids will climb up and fall off or something. But other code, they were using the 2006 code, so I applied for a code modification to the county, and they eventually approved it. So it's only the second site in Delaware that has a cable railing. It made the customers much happier because it looks a lot better with a contemporary style house like that. So, and we actually got an award from the cable company for the design, and they sent me a t-shirt. It was great. So anyway, that's one example. I do all sorts of things. I did the wood-fired pizza shop over here. We tore out all the interior of the old building and rebuilt it into what they have now, and redid all the plumbing and everything. And Brenna was actually their first employee. So she got to learn about a startup firsthand. Because they had done catering with a pizza truck, doing mobile things before, but not a brick and mortar type thing. And that property was pretty much blighted over the years. It seemed like there was always some weird store of different types, and so now it's an actual viable business, which is really neat. So anyway, I was going to go over some of the things we've looked at, my wife and I, over the years, because we always, for some reason, wanted to be an entrepreneur, and didn't have the training or anyway, we looked at a lot of different types of businesses. So I thought that might help you guys think about what you want to do. And so one thing, if you really like doing it, you have to think about it a little differently than just a avocation. You got to think, can I really do this day in and day out and enjoy it? Because one thing I learned at Gore was, I really like running and cycling and triathlons and motorsports and stuff, and I got to do that a little bit more, but I mostly ended up working a lot and traveling a lot, so I didn't get to ride or run and do these things nearly as often. So you have to examine all that and be fair about your analysis, to yourself. But really, it isn't like work at all. It's much more fun to have your own business, and people say you can work whatever 70 or 80 hours a week you want that way. So but it doesn't seem like work so much, But anyway, one thing that's really good is you can learn a lot from people like you're doing now that are in business, especially if it's the business that you're interested in. If you can find people to talk to, it really helps. That some of this sounds just like common sense, but a lot of people don't actually do it. And I even traveling, I'll stop and talk to a bike shop about different things, and the families say, "What are you doing that for? Come on, we got to go. We're going to miss our vacation," But I still really enjoy talking to all kinds of people and learning things. And the other thing is pick something that can be profitable enough to actually support itself. There are a lot of people that just go into business and they don't look at what they actually need to charge to cover all their expenses. And this also seems kind of obvious, but a lot of people don't do that. One reason they have building inspectors, for example, I learned this from talking to one of them in Maryland. This guy was committed to building an addition for these people, and it was like 20 feet long, 2 stories, and 15 feet wide. And he said, "Yeah, I can do it for $30,000." That sounded like a huge amount of money to him, but he never looked into what everything cost. So he started framing it, he cut a hole in their house, and they ran out of money. And so they have this big hole in their house and no roof on that part. And fortunately, Maryland has a system we all pay into. They all give them $30,000 up to that and close it in so the homeowner, at least the house can function. But so this kid, he was like out of high school, and knew what he was doing with the framing and stuff, but not the business side. And it should have been priced at $90,000, and so it was way under. It sounded great to the homeowner, but they didn't know what they were doing either. So you have to say you have an old truck and you're going into construction. You really have to start paying into a fund to buy yourself a new truck, several years out. And then all the other things, people don't realize how much insurance you have to have, and both liability and then commercial, and then all the licenses you have to get and everything. But anyway, that's just another thing. Some of the businesses we looked at, the first one, since I studied entomology, some people like to learn about bugs so they can let them crawl on them. I don't know, I never liked that. I want to learn how to kill them. So, because that's where more money was. And actually I have a friend who went into that. He raises bugs for FMC up in Philadelphia. He raises like 30 species so that they can test the insecticide on them, and find out what works and what doesn't, and so on. We looked into starting a muffin bakery because we traveled out to Colorado, and there's this, we liked health food, we're not too focused on that, but we really liked muffins, and now, there's cupcakes, for example, are really big, but muffins were big back then. So we actually bought the pest control, I decided I didn't really want to deal with going into people's houses and spraying and all that stuff, so that wasn't going to really work for me. It's definitely a good business, but I didn't want to do it. So the muffin bakery, we actually priced out all the equipment and what you have to do to become, a commercial kitchen, and I don't know, we just never wanted to devote that much time to it, I think, once we found out how involved it was. I looked at a franchise, the first one, I liked tools and things, so Mac Tools was one you could do. It cost about $100,000 to get involved in that franchise. You have your own truck, you drive around. Once I really found out what was involved, it sounded great, but you work about 12 hours during the day driving around and selling tools, and then you come home at night, eat dinner, and you work about another 4 hours doing all your paperwork, the ordering and billing and all that stuff. And at that time, I didn't really want to commit to that either, so never did that. But we did start, I don't know if you recognize anybody in there, but this was popular for a while. It's like a stork that you rent to people, and the bundle they get to keep. It has the baby's name and birth weight and time, whatever they want on there. So my wife's aunt drew this stork for us, and I scaled it up and made it. We still have it, and we put it in people's yards for when they have a baby, and we know from work or something. And we came up with a lot of other ideas too. We called the whole thing the town crier, and you could have an actual town crier person that could announce, like, corporate events, or we had a birthday cake. We had friends sit around here, we'd drink beer and wine and stuff and brainstorm about all this, and we came up with all these things. And we actually have drawings for all the other ones, but somehow just never got motivated to do that either. But we did make that and rented it a few times. So that was neat, and we could still do that, down the road if we retire or something and want something to do that's fun. So here's another business that I started. I actually became a dealer for Cobra Replica kits, and I bought 3, or we did. I went out to North Dakota for training for a week, and got the first kit, and I built this. And it took a year and a half of all my spare time. I was working full-time also, but then I figured out I would only make like $5 an hour or something like that, because it was so much work. But you really don't know until you do it, and if you can find enough people to help you at a low rate, but around here it was harder to find that. But we still have this actually also, and it's actually appreciated quite a bit. So, and it's now, I've had it since '92, so it's historic. So I registered in Maryland as a historic car. But it's lighter than a Miata. It's 2,400 pounds and it has 500 horsepower. It does 0 to 60 under 4 seconds. And here I made a graph of the gearing versus the speed. That's how I like to analyze things. But theoretically, at red line, it should do 180. And I've been 120 or so. But mostly it's fun to go around back roads and corner. Anyway, so then we looked at some more businesses. I told you, there was about 8 total, and we ended up in the 9th one. We, right after I left NDX, I knew a guy who was a business broker, and we found there was an art gallery in People's Plaza that was for sale. The artist owned it, but he wanted them to go more into the art, just doing paintings. He's very good. And so having, part of what I did at NDX was to value laboratories that we wanted to acquire, and then negotiate with the owners to sell the labs to us. And there's a whole procedure to that. You have to recast the financials into a corporate form, because people that run their own businesses can deduct all kinds of things, as you'll find out, which is a great thing. But you have to put it back into a corporate form in order for us to value it and to come into a public company. We have to follow all those rules, the general accepted accounting procedures and all that. So I did that with this company, and it's funny how things work out, but we made him an offer. I think I was offered him like 4 times profit for a year, which is very generous. A lot of times you offer 3. In the dental lab, we could go as high as 5 if they had a really valuable customer base. So we made him an offer in January, and they had just had a really good month. So he's didn't want to accept the offer, but it was very fair based on 5 years of sales, and they were growing, at like, 10% a year, and or 5% a year, and I did my projections with 10% a year. So I was being really fair, I thought, but he had a good month, and then he said, it's got to be worth a lot more than that. So So I said, well, I can't do any better than that. That's what it's worth. I can't afford to take on something. So we didn't buy it. 6 months later, sales had tapered off. You know, he realized that was one good month. He calls and said, "Oh, I accept your offer." And by then we had started the construction business without even trying, you know, and I already had a lot of tools. I didn't have this, financing costs. I could basically finance things as I went. So I said, I'm sorry, but it's not good anymore, and it was valuable then, but now I have this other thing going. I can't do that. So I don't even know if he ended up actually selling it. He might have just closed it up. It's a shame, but that's, timing is real important. Also looked at an Amco transmission franchise, which is actually a really good business if anybody ever wants to do a franchise and they're mechanically inclined. We actually paid a down payment on it and started looking around. We went through all the financial process to be approved by them. They're actually very rigorous just to become able to apply for a franchise. They want to know all kinds of history about you. The difficulty we had there was finding a location because they have defined territories, and we were going to have Elkton, which is a good area, but we looked for about a month and couldn't find any sites to build it because you actually build a new building. We found some that had an auto repair place there, and they said, no, we won't allow you to compete. You can do transmissions, but Amco was, unbeknownst to them, going to branch out into all sorts of things like they're doing now. You probably don't pay attention to the ads, but anyway, they were spreading out way beyond transmissions. So we couldn't, in good faith, buy that land and build a building. So unfortunately, we didn't end up doing that. But you can actually do really well, make it easily as the owner, $150,000 and up. And some owners make $500,000 or $600,000. So, and not that long of a time, because it's such a well-known brand and well-respected as far as that goes. A lot of transmission and auto repair places don't have a good reputation, so they've really differentiated themselves that way. And I looked at one recently, thinking about diversifying and going back to my roots of agricultural chemicals. So there's one from Canada called Weed Man, which is a little kid came up with the name. The guy started the business 40 years ago, and one of his customers' kids said, "Oh, Mom, look, the Weed Man's here." And he liked that. It's kind of goofy, I think, but it's memorable. And but I'll show you. I did a. Let's see if I can. There we go. I'll go out to Excel for a minute. And there was no real way to get this to fit. Hopefully you can read it. That's a pretty good screen. So one of the other things I did after graduate school is a friend went to work for a startup software company. And they hired me to write a spreadsheet that took 5 years of all the different expenses and flowed into all the financials. So this flows into balance sheet, income statement, cash flows, and everything. I can show you down the bottom. And I think I made $3,500 for 2 weeks of work by doing this for them. A lot of people didn't. I really like Excel, so I'd done a lot within grad school. So I did that for a while. They aren't in business anymore. The product didn't make it, but it was really interesting to do that. And so actually, if anybody wants a copy of the original spreadsheet, it's a neat thing to do an analysis with. You can put in your sales and all the different figures, and it'll calculate everything for you and flow out into the financial statements, which if you're applying for funding or anything anywhere, that would be real helpful. And the company's out of business, so I can give it away if I want to, because they aren't going to say anything. But anyway, a friend of mine, and he went to work for other companies after that. But anyway, you could see with this franchise that we analyzed, I just did 1 year to see what it was like. They have a really different structure for their franchise fees. They charge you they have a fee up front for the size of the territory. You can buy 1 or 2 or more. So I was going to get 2, and I think it's like 300,000 households in a territory, and I was thinking of Newcastle County and Kent County, Delaware, because there's a lot of houses there and a lot of growth. So, but until I, went through the process and got more information, I couldn't really do this analysis. So once I did, I'll show you how it came out for the first year. It would have been better the second year because you don't have the franchise fee, but they have a pretty high recurring cost. They charge you per truck that you have on the road. So if you grow, and it's like $11,000 a truck, that you have this fixed cost at the beginning of the year, every year, that you have to overcome before you even make anything. Anyway, so if you go down to the net profit, the first quarter you lose $65,000, which, you expect a certain amount of that when you're starting up. The second quarter, another $18,000, and then you actually make money the third quarter and the fourth quarter, but it's still, you're under like $52,000. So for the first year, which, I didn't really think that was the best way to go, because I know enough myself to start this kind of business without paying any kind of franchise fees. So that's what you always have to balance it with. Is the expertise that you're buying from them basically for the fees worth it? And in this case, it wasn't to me. But it also reminded me I didn't really feel like I wanted to. I also caught up on what all the latest herbicides, insecticides, fungicides are out there, and looked up the, toxicology and the environmental impact, and I decided I didn't really want to be part of that. Again, I was at one point, I learned a lot about it, but I didn't really want to, it really hadn't changed that much. It's not dangerous or anything, I just don't want to do that day in and day out. Once I visited their site and all that. So, I thought maybe things had changed, and because a lot of products are very safe now. They break down into nothing, but in no time. But anyway, those are some of the other things that you think about once you've learned all that you can about the business. A lot of it sounds great at first, but it's important to analyze everything as much as you can, because a lot of things having been involved in all different businesses, budgeting and projecting sales is an educated guess in a lot of cases. It's very difficult to be precise, but you can actually usually nail down the cost pretty well. So if you can do that and do a spreadsheet like that and look at, when am I going to start making money? And, a lot of things like Jordan told me about is software or website business. You have a lot lower fixed costs, so you can make money a lot sooner. So, I was looking at more of the brick and mortar type things, but the company I did the consulting for, actually I want to show you that real quick. Software, of course, is very low cost once you develop it. See, if you go to the 2003 plan, you go over here, the net profit was going to be $11 million in the second year of startup, and they were in that weed franchise, I didn't even have any sales expense, or I wasn't paying myself anything. So that was another factor, and it was kind of not that good. But these guys were paying, a lot higher expenses. You can see, and they had a couple facilities. They had, $105,000 a month sales expense, benefits, all the things that you should have in a startup like that. Go ahead.
We got about 15 more minutes.
Okay.
And then if we open it up to questions, you can make a quick couple closing points if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll finish up real quick. Where's this? There it is. Okay. Yeah, I can. Oh yeah, geez. I start talking, tell you, my family says that, and start talking to people. And anyway, these are some things that either courses I took or books I read that were really helpful over time at different companies. Dale Carnegie wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People in 1936, and it's still just as valuable, maybe even more so today, because it basically says people are interested in themselves, and if you start asking questions about them, they will really like you. I mean, that's as basic as I can get, and I find that really works with customers. If they have a cat or a dog, you ask about them, you ask about their hobbies, and don't talk about yourself much at all until you get to, your skills that you can bring to bear on their issues. So I took a lot of selling courses, communicating, even strategy of experimentation from DuPont. Gore, we were big on selling at high prices. Our lowest profit product at the time was 59% net profit, not gross. That's after covering all the expenses. I had a product that we sold to Nike that was 94% profit. Our first order was like 1.4 million, and it was very lightweight, ultra breathable, not waterproof. And now they have wind stopper, and but anyway, it's different now, so I can talk about it because we passed the statute of limitations. I studied competitive intelligence, and then I actually was fortunate enough to see W. Edwards Deming speak for 2 days. It was really boring, but it was really good content. It was just hard to stay awake. And he was like 89 years old or something like that. But it really, he revolutionized quality management. And I bring all that to bear on the construction business now. And it's amazing how many people don't follow normal business practices, and they would be so much more successful. I'll go through this quickly too. If you need to find out some way to differentiate your company, obviously, and listening to your customers carefully is really important. So many people don't do that. And you have internal and external customers. Internal meaning your employees, your other peers, and so on. You got to listen to all of them. That's like the 360-degree evaluation is based on that sort of thing. Everybody that you interact with is a customer one way or another. You're supplying them, or they're a supplier to you sometimes. Always do what you say you're going to do. So many people, I run into a lot of people that don't even, they promise something to the customer, they forget it, they don't put it in a contract, and then they can't deliver it and prove that they either didn't promise to do it, or they did promise and the customer remembers it. So it's always important to have a contract also. It seems like kind of a formality, but that's not always true in every type of business too. But you also have to be fair to, everybody, customer used to always be right, but that's not really necessarily true. You want to be fair to them and to yourself. And, Gore, for example, we used to talk to people, we had a satisfaction guarantee for all our products. But you had to sometimes have a discussion with people that they expected their running suit to last 20 years. And it, if they ran in such a way that their foot came by their leg and rubbed through the fabric, it would only last a year. But you can't expect, and a reasonable person usually won't expect that to hold up. They should switch to like a mountaineering pants or something that's really durable. But so you have to balance that. And then, don't be afraid of challenges. Like I talked about that railing. The guy told me there was no way it was going to pass, but I tried anyway. And the customer loves it, and now their neighbors want to do that same thing. And don't compete on price if you can help it. Anybody can drive themselves out of business by giving a lower and lower price. So let them. Don't fall for that. And you'll never cover your company expenses and grow if you don't. You have to an extent, but try to avoid that. Always provide like excellent value, at least as what it's kind of related to doing what you say you're going to do. Actually show up. A lot of contractors especially, or other service businesses, which a lot of the businesses out there now that you could start up are service oriented because manufacturing has gone overseas. Some of it's coming back, but it's mostly service. And if you actually show up when you say you're going to, either for the first meeting, well, always, and then when you come back and actually do the work on time, you'll set yourself so far apart from anybody else. You wouldn't believe what people do. They won't show up for months sometimes, and the customer's sitting there with a half-finished project. I talked about this a little before. Make sure you take into account all your expenses. And you do a lot better focusing on quality than trying to do quantity, which, that's, like, I don't do any advertising, for example. I get all my business through either repeat business or referrals from customers. And that vets both me and the customer, which is helpful because you don't necessarily want to work for everyone out there. There are people that are unreasonable and will just try to, they're bottom fishing. They want to try to get a real low price, but usually they end up paying for it in the long run. The last thing I have to say, like I learned at Gore, we did a lot of market research on why people bought Gore-Tex. And on sales of about 80 million one year, we spent 18 million in advertising. So that was really expensive, but that was a strategy, and they don't do that anymore. But we found that 70% of why people buy it is word of mouth. The actual experience, now there's lots of, ratings and reviews online, but people buy those. But if you actually hear from somebody that's a user and they've been on a mountain in, the Himalayas and they survived because they were wearing Gore-Tex, it's hard to beat that kind of referral. So anyway, now can I have questions? Hopefully.
Yeah, we got time for like 1 or 2 questions.
Yes.
Did you have any really big mentors as you were going through all these different businesses?
Yeah, I did actually. Not at every company, but had one at NORAM who, he wanted to hire. He had a different vision of who he wanted to hire for that position, but he and I really hit it off, and so he hired me, and then I learned a lot from him. He was a PhD in entomology and very into strategic planning, and so I learned a lot from him. I had another guy who'd been in the dental lab business for his whole life and grew from a business from in his basement of his mom's house to $6 million in sales a year. And he would buy a new Corvette every year if he wanted to, and is very wealthy now, and sold his company to the publicly traded company. But he was just and he never went beyond high school. He just had business sense. And I learned a lot. I even learned a lot from just tradesmen, you know, just talking to them about their approach to life and what they used to do, or, you know, what happened to have them fall out of. I talked to some homeless people for a while in Las Vegas one time. I was waiting for my room in my motel to be open. And I'm just sitting out there in the square, and they happened to be there, so I started asking them about, well, what, you know, why are you homeless, you know? So I learned a lot from that. You know, you know, it was unfortunate circumstances, or they wanted to be free, you know, and felt like, you know, all this other stuff encumbered them, you know. But you never know what you're going to learn. So it's, I don't know. I enjoy talking to all kinds of people. Trying to think if there are other ones. I have other ones that I learned what not to do. I had a boss who was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years younger than me, maybe 10. And right out of Northeastern University, he studied business. He was an extreme micromanager. He would even criticize how you typed. And he wouldn't listen to any input. He, you know, like when you want to space over, you hit tab. Well, he would push the space bar like 12 times. And then it was just really strange guy. He ended up getting canned because of that. He was too much of a micromanager. And he wanted to work, you know, ridiculous amounts of hours. He didn't care if he had a life. He saw his wife about every 3 months. And she was happy with that too. She just wanted to go kayaking all the time. But anyway, she didn't work and didn't want to. But anyway, they're not married anymore either. But so, yeah, you learn some things about what you don't want to do or be like. So, you have a question?
Well, I have a comment. I just want to say that I appreciated that you presented all the different ventures that you explored, because I think a lot of our students go through like a series of different ideas that they kind of filter through while they're exploring, like on their journey of finding what they're most passionate about and where they can add value. Yeah, so I don't know, it was cool that you present that as like a fun and exciting way to figure out, to learn about yourself and learn about new markets, instead of saying they were like mistakes or like abandoned ideas or something.
Yeah, oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, we learned something from every one of those you know, processes, and we got more and more technical in our analysis. But sometimes you know just from a gut feeling that you don't want to do something, or you do want to do something. So I don't know.
Awesome. The people have to start a mental class. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it.